The village of Kilima lay nestled among rolling hills, its narrow dirt paths weaving between clusters of mud brick homes and patches of wildflowers that stubbornly bloomed despite the dry earth. Life here was slow and simple, shaped by ancient traditions and deep-rooted superstitions that had been passed down through countless generations. In this village, where the past held an unyielding grip on the present, one figure stood apart, not by choice but by fear and prejudice. That figure was Nia. Nia was a young woman of 17, slender and quiet, with eyes like dark pools that reflected a world she rarely shared. Her black hair was always tied back neatly, though often tangled from the harsh winds that swept through the hills. She wore simple clothes, patched and worn, but carried herself with a calm dignity that belied the harshness of her daily reality. From a young age, Nia had been marked by the villagers as different, cursed even. The root of this suspicion was a strange tale whispered among the elders. It was said that anyone who touched Nia's spit would fall ill, that she carried a shadow within her that could poison the very earth beneath her feet. Because of this, a cruel ritual had taken hold in Kilima. Before every prayer gathering, the villagers would spit in her direction, a symbolic rejection meant to ward off the curse they believed she bore. Each morning, as the sun's first light bathed the village in gold, Nia would walk the dusty paths to the small chapel where prayers were said. The moment she appeared, faces would turn away, and the sound of spit hitting the dirt behind her was a bitter reminder of her place in the village. A place on the fringes, outside the circle of warmth and acceptance. Children who once might have played near her now kept their distance, warned by their parents of the spit curse that clung to Nia like a shadow. The market women whispered behind tightly folded hands, and even the village elders spoke of her with wary eyes, muttering prayers for protection and blessings to keep the curse at bay. Despite this relentless ostracism, Nia bore her burden with quiet resilience. She understood the fear that gripped the village, the ancient stories that shaped their worldviews, yet she never allowed their hatred to define her spirit. In the solitude of her small home, tucked beneath the outstretched branches of a solitary acacia tree, she found moments of peace. She tended a small garden with fragile herbs and wildflowers, nurturing life where others only saw darkness. Nia's days were spent in silent service to the village, fetching water from the well, mending torn clothes, and caring for the sick when no one else would. She knew their fear made her invisible, but her kindness wove through the village like a gentle breeze, unnoticed but persistent. When the village children fell ill or the elders grew weak with age, Nia was often the one who stayed by their side, offering remedies learned from the whispered secrets of the earth. Yet even in these acts of compassion, the villagers' mistrust never wavered. The spit that greeted her before prayers was a reminder that love and fear were intertwined in a complex dance, and that her true nature remained hidden behind a veil of suspicion. At night, when the village slept and the stars burned bright above, Nia would sit outside her modest home, her hands folded in quiet prayer. She asked not for vengeance or change but for the strength to endure, to survive in a world that saw her as a curse. The moonlight would touch her face gently, as if offering silent comfort in a world that had none to give. In these moments, the true essence of Nia shone, resilient, unyielding, and quietly brave. Though the village spat upon her, she held within herself a seed of hope, waiting for the day it might bloom. The story of Nia was not just one of rejection and pain, but of the extraordinary courage it takes to live with kindness in the face of relentless cruelty. In the village of Kilima, where superstition ruled and fear shaped hearts, one young woman carried a light that no spit could extinguish. The sun had barely risen over Kilima when Nia sat quietly by the small fire outside her humble home, carefully crushing dried herbs between her fingers. The scent of chamomile and sage mingled with the crisp morning air, a gentle balm to her weary spirit. Despite the loneliness that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, Nia's heart held a secret, a gift that set her apart in ways far deeper than the villagers' whispered curses. From childhood, Nia had known she was different. She carried within her the rare and mysterious power of healing, a power that flowed through her veins and revealed itself most potently in her saliva. It was not a gift she had asked for, nor one she fully understood, but it was undeniable. Time and again, she had witnessed its quiet miracles, wounds that refused to heal suddenly closing, fevers breaking after a touch, even a withered flower blooming anew after she whispered to it and gently moistened its petals with a drop of her spit. Yet, in Kilima, where superstition ruled and fear shaped the villagers' lives, such a gift was both a blessing and a curse. The same saliva that held the power to heal was also the source of whispered tales of curses and dark magic. The elders spoke of long-forgotten legends, stories passed down through generations that told of a woman who could bring either life or death with a single breath. To them, Nia was the living embodiment of those fearful tales. As a result, the villagers' hatred was rooted not only in ignorance but in genuine terror. Mothers pulled their children away when she passed, and the market women's gossip grew louder, accusing her of witchcraft and dark dealings. Even those who had received her healing in secret spoke of her in hushed tones, afraid that association might bring them misfortune. Nia's days were filled with an aching desire to help, to prove that her gift was one of mercy and light, not darkness. But each time she extended her hand or offered a remedy, she met resistance. Doors slammed, faces twisted in disgust, and cold words pierced her like arrows. The spit she carried, the very essence of her healing, was the very thing that repulsed them, a symbol of the curse they feared. One bitter morning, a young boy named Jabari arrived at her doorstep, clutching his injured arm, his face pale with pain. His mother had forbidden him from seeking Nia's help, but desperation had driven him. Nia greeted him with a gentle smile and tender hands. She cleansed his wound and carefully moistened the torn skin with her saliva, whispering soothing words as the boy's pain eased and the bleeding stopped. Word of Jabari's recovery spread quickly, stirring a mixture of awe and dread. Some villagers were amazed by the miracle, while others grew more fearful, convinced that Nia's power was unnatural and dangerous. The village council convened in secret, debating how to contain the curse they believed threatened their community. Meanwhile, Nia grappled with her isolation, the invisible walls built by fear pressing tighter with each passing day. She longed for acceptance, for a chance to show that her gift was a blessing, not a bane. Yet, her heart ached for the warmth of human connection that was so often denied. In quiet moments she pored over ancient texts and listened to the wind's whispers, searching for answers and guidance. She dreamed of a day when her healing would be seen for what it truly was, when fear would be replaced by understanding. Despite the villagers' hatred, Nia's compassion never wavered. She continued to help those in secret, offering her gift to the sick and the wounded under the cover of night, risking punishment and scorn. Each life she touched was a quiet victory, a step toward breaking the chains of superstition that bound her. Her struggle was not only against the village's fear but against her own doubts. There were nights when the weight of rejection crushed her spirit, and tears stained the earth beneath the acacia tree where she found solace. Yet with each dawn she rose again, determined to use her gift for good. Nia's secret was both her power and her burden, a silent battle waged in the shadows of a world too afraid to see the light she carried within. And so, in the village of Kilima, where superstition and hope intertwined, Nia lived as a healer hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when her true purpose would be revealed. The kingdom of Zawadi was a land of sweeping plains and towering mountains, ruled by King Jabari, a leader both wise and compassionate. His palace rose like a jewel in the center of the kingdom, its white stone walls gleaming under the relentless sun. The people revered their royal family, and the prince, young Tano, was the pride and hope of the land. But a shadow had fallen over the kingdom. Prince Tano, once full of life and vigor, had been struck by a mysterious illness that no healer could cure. His once bright eyes had dulled, and his strong frame had withered to a fragile shadow of itself. The royal physicians, despite their knowledge and countless remedies, were helpless. They called it a sickness of the spirit as much as the body, a malaise that refused to yield to medicine or prayer. The palace was a place of muted worry. Corridors that had once echoed with laughter now rang with whispered fears. King Jabari paced endlessly through his chambers, his crown heavy with the weight of a father's concern. Queen Zuri, steadfast but fragile, spent hours by the prince's bedside, her prayers weaving a delicate thread of hope through the air. Every healer in the kingdom had been summoned, their skills tested against the relentless sickness. Herbalists brought rare plants, priests performed sacred rituals, and even foreign doctors arrived with exotic medicines. Yet nothing could halt the prince's decline. The palace courtiers exchanged uneasy glances, rumors spreading like wildfire through the marble halls. Some whispered that the prince was cursed, others that dark magic had taken root within him. Fear settled over the court like a thick fog, dampening spirits and igniting desperate prayers for a miracle. Outside the palace walls, the kingdom held its breath. Markets fell silent, work slowed, and prayers rose from every village and town. The people's love for the prince was boundless, and their hope was fragile yet unyielding. In the royal chambers, the prince lay motionless, his breath shallow but steady. His mother's hands never left his cool forehead, and his father's gaze was fixed on a distant horizon where answers seemed just out of reach. Amidst this growing despair, a faint light flickered, a whisper of hope carried on the winds. It spoke of a healer from a distant village, a young woman whose gift was as mysterious as it was powerful. Yet, in the court of kings and queens, such whispers were met with skepticism and doubt. As days turned into weeks, the prince's condition worsened, and the kingdom's desperation deepened. The royal family's anxiety grew with each passing hour, their dreams haunted by the shadow of loss. It was in this time of darkness that fate began to weave its intricate thread, connecting the isolated village of Kilima to the heart of the royal palace. The story of Prince Tano's illness was not just one of sickness and sorrow, but of a kingdom's hope clinging to the possibility that even the most mysterious afflictions could be healed. The journey toward that hope was about to begin, carried by a healer whose own life was shaped by rejection and resilience. The dawn broke softly over the village of Kilima, but the usual calm was pierced by the urgent footsteps of a rider approaching on horseback. The royal messenger, a tall man named Baraka, carried with him the weight of the kingdom's desperate hope. Clad in the deep blue cloak embroidered with golden threads of the royal crest, he was a figure both commanding and weary, tasked with a mission few dared to believe would succeed. Baraka rode swiftly through the winding dirt paths, the sound of hooves stirring the dust and rousing villagers from their morning routines. His arrival was met with curious glances and wary whispers, for visitors were rare, and a royal messenger rarer still. Word had spread quickly that the king's envoy was seeking someone, a healer whose name had become a legend whispered in the shadows. The villagers gathered near the small market square, their faces marked by suspicion and fear. Baraka dismounted with purposeful grace, his eyes scanning the crowd as he began his inquiry. "I seek the healer of whom the whispers speak," he announced. "A woman with a gift that can mend what others cannot. She goes by the name Nia." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one stepped forward. Mothers pulled their children closer, and elders exchanged glances, their expressions tight with denial. "There is no such healer here," one barked, a burly farmer named Cato, his voice sharp and unwelcoming. "You waste your time, messenger. There is no one cursed among us that can heal kings." Baraka's gaze was steady but calm. "The king's son is dying. The healers of the palace have failed. If she exists, her help is needed more than ever." The villagers' faces hardened, a wall of fear and superstition rising between them and the messenger. Some whispered about curses and bad omens, warning that any association with Nia might bring ruin. Others were afraid of royal wrath should they speak the truth. The collective silence was deafening. Unseen by the crowd, Nia stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart pounding. The news of the prince's illness and the messenger's search stirred a flicker of hope deep within her. Yet she also felt the familiar sting of rejection, knowing that the villagers' denial was both a shield and a prison. Baraka's persistence was unwavering. He spoke with elders, visited the village chief, and asked about the strange woman who was spat on before prayers. Each inquiry was met with evasive answers or outright denial. The villagers' fear was palpable. A refusal to acknowledge Nia's existence was both a means of protection and a continuation of the curse that bound her. During his stay, Baraka observed Nia quietly helping a sick child from afar. Though she was hidden behind the veil of village disdain, her actions spoke louder than words. The messenger's belief in her grew, tempered by the reality of the villagers' mistrust. On the final day of his visit, Baraka sought out Nia privately, finding her near the acacia tree where she tended her herbs. He spoke gently, his voice carrying the urgency of the king's plight and the hope that rested on her shoulders. "Nia," he said, "the prince's life hangs by a thread. If you have the gift they fear, now is the time to use it. Will you come to the palace and save him?" Nia's eyes shone with determination, mingled with fear. She knew the journey would be fraught with danger and prejudice, but the call to help was stronger than the fear that bound her. The villagers watched from a distance as she prepared to leave, their expressions a mix of skepticism and quiet awe. Some prayed silently for her success, while others whispered warnings of doom. As Nia mounted the horse offered by Baraka, the village seemed to hold its breath, a moment suspended between the past of rejection and the uncertain future that awaited her beyond the hills. The first light of dawn crept cautiously over the hills surrounding Kilima, casting a soft glow on the dusty paths that wound through the village. Nia stood at the edge of her small garden, the cool morning breeze brushing against her face as she carefully gathered the few herbs she had grown, sage, chamomile, and a rare blue flower that only bloomed in the spring. The scent filled her senses, mingling with the quiet hum of a village slowly waking to another day. Yet this morning was unlike any other. The royal messenger Baraka's words echoed in her mind, stirring a deep resolve that had long been buried beneath layers of fear and loneliness. The prince was dying, and despite the villagers' harsh treatment, despite their spit and scorn, Nia felt a fierce urge to act, to use the gift she had been given not as a curse but as a blessing. The thought of leaving Kilima was daunting. Her home, marked by isolation and suspicion, was all she had ever known. The very people who spat on her before prayers now whispered stories of a distant palace where she might find purpose, or perhaps face even greater rejection. But to remain was to watch helplessly as the suffering prince slipped away, and that was a fate she could not accept. Nia returned to her small hut, the walls worn but familiar. She carefully packed what little she had: a leather satchel containing dried herbs, a small clay vial of water from the sacred spring, and a simple wooden pendant carved by her late mother, a symbol of protection and love. Each item was a talisman against the unknown journey ahead. As she prepared, memories of the villagers' cruelty surfaced: faces twisted in disdain, children darting away in fear, elders muttering prayers to keep her cursed spirit at bay. The sting of rejection was fresh, yet beneath it burned a quiet strength. Nia had endured this loneliness for years, and now that endurance would carry her forward. Her mind wandered to the stories her mother once told her by the fire, tales of healers and heroes, of courage blossoming in the darkest places. Those stories had seemed like distant dreams then, but now they were a beacon lighting her path. Outside, the village began to stir. Some villagers noticed her preparations and whispered among themselves. Some expressed disbelief that she would dare to answer the king's call. Others feared what might come if the healer they feared left their protection. But Nia paid them no mind. Her resolve was firm. Before leaving, she visited the small shrine beneath the ancient baobab tree, where villagers left offerings for the spirits of the land. Though many had cursed her, Nia knelt in silent prayer, seeking strength and guidance. She pressed her hands to the rough bark, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her fingertips, and whispered a vow to use her gift for healing, not harm. The messenger, Baraka, awaited her at the village edge, his horse patiently standing as a symbol of the journey to come. When Nia approached, he offered a reassuring smile. "The road ahead will be difficult, but your courage will be your guide." Mounting the horse, Nia glanced back once at the village that had shaped her, a place of pain and resilience intertwined. The narrow paths and dusty huts seemed smaller now, dwarfed by the vastness of the world beyond. As they set off toward the distant palace, Nia's heart was heavy with the weight of the unknown but buoyed by the hope that her healing might save a life and change a fate. The journey was not only one of miles, but of transformation, from outcast to healer, from silence to strength. With every step away from Kilima, the promise of new beginnings stretched before her like the endless horizon, waiting to be claimed. The path from Kilima to the royal capital of Zawadi was long and treacherous, stretching over rugged hills and through dense forests where shadows clung to every tree. As Nia rode upon Baraka's steady horse, the rhythmic clatter of hooves against stone echoed a steady heartbeat, carrying her further from the only home she had ever known and deeper into the unknown. The early days of the journey were marked by harsh challenges. The sun beat down mercilessly, drying the cracked earth and making every step a test of endurance. Nia's muscles ached from long hours in the saddle, and the weight of her mission settled heavy on her shoulders. Despite Baraka's reassuring presence, doubt crept into her mind like a stubborn fog. Would the palace accept her? Could her healing truly save the prince? Or would she be cast away once more, a cursed outcast in an even grander court? At night, as the campfire's glow flickered against the darkness, Nia found herself wrestling with these fears. The crackling flames seemed to echo the turmoil in her heart. Yet, amid the doubts, memories of her past offered strength. She recalled the quiet mornings tending her garden, the gentle smiles of those she had helped in Kilima, and the whispered prayers for her courage. On one such night, Baraka noticed her silence and spoke softly, "The road is hard, but your spirit is stronger. The prince needs you and so does the kingdom." Nia nodded, drawing comfort from his words. She reached into her satchel, pulling out a small wooden pendant, her mother's gift, and held it tightly. It was a symbol of love, protection, and the legacy she carried with her. As the journey continued, nature tested them. Sudden storms soaked the earth, turning paths to slippery mud. Thorny brambles scratched at Nia's arms when she dismounted to clear the way. Once, a pack of wild dogs howled nearby, their eyes gleaming in the dark, sending shivers down her spine. But each challenge only steeled her resolve. Along the way, Nia encountered travelers from distant villages and towns, some wary, others kind. She offered healing for minor wounds and ailments, always discreetly, wary of attracting unwanted attention. These small acts of kindness rekindled her faith in the goodness that still existed beyond Kilima. She also spent hours in contemplation, reflecting on the superstition that had shaped her life. The fear of her gift was not born of malice alone but of ignorance and ancient tales that had grown like weeds over time. She vowed that, if given the chance, she would show the world the true power of compassion. Days passed, and the silhouette of the royal palace finally appeared on the horizon, a majestic fortress of white stone and soaring towers that gleamed like a beacon. Nia's heart quickened, a mixture of awe and apprehension washing over her. The city of Zawadi was alive with bustling markets, colorful banners, and people from all walks of life. Yet, beneath the surface vibrated an anxious energy, the same desperation that had propelled the messenger to seek her out. As Nia and Baraka made their way through the crowded streets, whispers followed her like shadows. Some recognized the story of the healer from Kilima, others watched with skepticism or curiosity. The palace gates loomed ahead, guarded and imposing, but beyond them lay the hope for the prince and perhaps for Nia herself. Before entering, Nia paused to steady her breath and gather her courage. The journey had been long and fraught with peril, but this was the moment that mattered most. With a final glance at the bustling city around her, Nia stepped forward, ready to face the unknown and to offer her healing gift to a prince whose life hung in the balance. The grand doors of the royal palace of Zawadi opened with a low, resonant creak as Nia stepped inside, her heart pounding in rhythm with the palace's ancient stones. The marble floors gleamed under ornate chandeliers, and richly woven tapestries told stories of the kingdom's glorious past. Yet amid this splendor, a heavy silence hung, an echo of the grave concern that had settled over the court. Nia was led through vast halls lined with curious courtiers and servants whose eyes flicked with suspicion and disbelief. Whispers followed her like shadows, talk of a healer from a distant village, a girl marked by superstition and fear. Despite the grandeur around her, Nia felt the weight of countless judgments pressing down. At last she was ushered into the prince's chambers. The room was dimly lit, perfumed faintly with jasmine and herbs, but its air was thick with worry. There, on a carved wooden bed draped with silken sheets, lay Prince Tano. His once vibrant eyes were now clouded with weakness, his breathing shallow, his skin pale as the moonlight that filtered through the tall windows. Nia approached quietly, her gaze steady but gentle. She knelt beside the prince, feeling the fragile pulse beneath her fingers. Though he was frail, a faint spark of life flickered, a fragile ember that had yet to be extinguished. The royal court gathered at the doorway, a mix of nobles and physicians, their faces a blend of skepticism and hope. Some whispered doubts, questioning whether a girl shunned by her own village could possibly hold the key to saving a prince. Others watched with cautious anticipation, yearning for a miracle. Nia's hands trembled slightly, but her resolve did not waver. She reached out, and with a whisper of ancient words she had learned from her mother, she gently moistened her fingers with saliva, a sacred touch she had used many times before to heal. Carefully she traced the prince's forehead and hands, her breath steady and calm. The court gasped softly, the act seen as both shocking and sacred. In their eyes, the spit of an outcast was an unlikely vessel of healing, yet the power within it was undeniable. Slowly the prince's chest rose with a steadier breath, and color began to return to his cheeks. King Jabari, standing at the head of the room, watched intently, his expression unreadable but his eyes betraying a flicker of hope. Queen Zuri clutched his arm, tears shimmering as she witnessed the faint revival of her son. The prince's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment his gaze met Nia's, a silent exchange of gratitude and recognition. Though his strength was far from restored, the promise of recovery had been ignited. Whispers swept through the chamber like a gentle breeze, carrying both awe and doubt. The royal physicians exchanged uncertain glances, caught between their knowledge and the inexplicable healing they had just witnessed. Nia remained humble, her hands still resting lightly on the prince, aware that the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges. Yet in this fragile moment hope had taken root, not just in the prince, but in the hearts of all who witnessed the healing. As the court slowly dispersed, many lingered in thought, pondering the young woman whose gift defied expectation and tradition. Nia's journey from outcast to healer had only just begun, but the seed of change had been planted in the heart of the kingdom. The grand chamber of the royal palace was hushed, filled with an expectant silence that seemed to thrum with tension and hope. Nia stood beside Prince Tano's bed, her heart steady but her mind racing. The weight of the kingdom's fate rested upon her shoulders, and the eyes of the royal court bore down with a mixture of skepticism, fear, and desperate longing. The act she was about to perform was simple yet profound. one that had been a secret passed down through generations in her village, a sacred healing ritual involving her saliva. To the villagers of Kilima, it was a symbol of life and restoration. To the courtiers of Zawadi, it was unthinkable, even repulsive. Nia took a slow, deep breath, centering herself. The room was filled with nobles clad in silks and jewels, their faces tight with unease. The royal physicians, adorned with scrolls and vials, watched with furrowed brows, their disbelief barely concealed. Servants held their breath, waiting to see if the healer's gift would be a blessing or a curse. With trembling hands, Nia brought her fingers to her lips and gently moistened them with her saliva, the essence of her power. The gesture, so natural to her, sent a ripple of horror through the gathered crowd. Gasps whispered like wind through the chamber, and some noblewomen instinctively covered their mouths in shock. King Jabari's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his regal features. Queen Zuri's fingers tightened around his arm, her hope mingling with fear. The prince, pale and frail, lay still as if sensing the importance of what was to come. Nia lowered her hand carefully, pressing her moist fingertips to the prince's forehead. She whispered words in a tongue only she fully understood, a soft incantation meant to call forth the healing spirits. Then she moved to his hands, tracing gentle circles with her saliva-wet touch. The room was still except for the prince's shallow breathing and the faint crackle of a nearby fire. The courtiers' faces were a mixture of revulsion and astonishment, unable to reconcile the act with their rigid ideas of propriety and medicine. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an eternity. Then a subtle change began. The prince's breathing grew more even, his chest rising and falling with a steadier rhythm. A warmth spread across his cheeks, flushing the pallor that had settled there like a shroud. Whispers turned to murmurs as the onlookers exchanged glances. The royal physicians leaned forward, their skepticism challenged by the undeniable signs of improvement. Queen Zuri's eyes filled with tears, and King Jabari's stern mask softened into a hopeful smile. Nia continued her ritual with unwavering focus, guided by the strength of her gift and the love she carried for the life before her. Each touch was a thread weaving the fragile fabric of health back into the prince's body, an act of defiance against the fear and superstition that had kept her isolated. As the hours passed, the transformation was clear. The prince's strength returned in measured increments, a faint movement of his fingers, a soft murmur of his voice, a spark of light in his eyes. The court, once filled with doubt and disdain, now watched in awe and reverence. The initial horror at the healing ritual gave way to a profound respect for the young woman who had defied tradition to save their prince. Murmurs of gratitude and wonder rippled through the chamber, replacing the earlier whispers of fear. Nia's act was not just one of healing the body, but of bridging two worlds, the village marked by superstition and the palace bound by protocol. In that sacred space, the spit that had been a symbol of rejection became a symbol of hope and renewal. As the night deepened, the prince's breathing steadied, and his eyes closed in peaceful rest. The court slowly dispersed, their minds forever changed by the miracle they had witnessed. King Jabari and Queen Zuri remained behind, their hearts buoyed by newfound hope. The queen approached Nia with a gentle smile, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done what no other could," she whispered. "Your courage and gift have saved my son." Nia bowed her head humbly, feeling the weight of gratitude and responsibility. Her journey from outcast to healer was only beginning, but in this moment she had changed the fate of a kingdom. News traveled fast through the winding paths and dusty lanes of Kilima, carried on the lips of travelers, traders, and wandering minstrels. The story of the prince's miraculous recovery at the hands of the village outcast, Nia, spread like wildfire, igniting conversations and stirring emotions that had long been buried beneath fear and superstition. At first, disbelief reigned. Many villagers refused to accept that the very girl they had spat upon and shunned was the same healer who had saved the prince's life. "It must be a trick," some muttered, crossing themselves and clutching talismans against what they still feared was a curse. Others whispered that the royal court was trying to manipulate the people with tales of miracles to gain favor. But as the days passed and no retraction came from the palace, the tide began to turn. Traders returning from Zawadi brought first-hand accounts of Nia's bravery and skill, describing how even the king and queen had praised her. The villagers' fear began to mingle with awe, confusion battling with a dawning respect. In the village square, groups gathered under the shade of the baobab tree, debating the meaning of this change. Elders who had once declared Nia cursed found themselves silenced or forced to reconsider. The young and curious listened intently, some beginning to question the old tales that had long justified their cruelty. Nia herself remained in Kilima, returning after her time at the palace, greeted by a mix of wary eyes and tentative smiles. The shift in the village's attitude was subtle but undeniable. Where once there had been scorn, now there were nods of acknowledgement, quiet thanks from those she had healed in secret. Her small garden flourished anew, tended by hands that no longer avoided her touch. Children who once fled her presence now approached with cautious curiosity, their faces bright with the innocent hope of acceptance. Even some of the village elders sought her counsel, humbled by the undeniable truth of her gift. Yet the transition was not without struggle. Old fears died hard, and whispers of suspicion still lingered in shadowed corners. Nia bore these remnants with grace, understanding that change was a slow and patient journey. She continued her work, healing wounds both physical and spiritual, becoming a bridge between the past and a hopeful future. The villagers' transformation mirrored the healing she had performed on the prince, a restoration not just of body but of trust, understanding, and community. Through Nia's courage, the boundaries of superstition began to crumble, replaced by a new narrative of compassion and acceptance. As the seasons turned and the village thrived, Nia stood as a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the power of kindness in the face of fear. Her story, once one of rejection, had become a beacon of hope, illuminating the path for those willing to see beyond old shadows. In Kilima, the spit that had once been a mark of scorn was now recognized as a sign of healing and strength, forever changing the way the village saw itself and the world beyond. The sun rose over the palace of Zawadi, its golden light spilling through the tall windows and bathing the grand halls in warmth. In the heart of the kingdom, a new chapter was beginning, not only for the young healer Nia, but for a realm that had long been bound by fear and tradition. King Jabari's court had gathered in the great hall, a place reserved for moments of importance and celebration. Courtiers in rich silks whispered with curiosity as the king stepped forward, his voice ringing clear and steady. "Today we honor one whose courage and gift have saved our beloved prince," he proclaimed, gesturing toward Nia, who stood humbly but proudly before the assembly. The hall erupted in applause, a sound that filled Nia's heart with a mixture of awe and humility. Prince Tano, now rested and stronger, approached her with a gentle smile. His eyes, once clouded with pain, shone brightly with gratitude. "You have given me life when all hope seemed lost," he said softly. "Your gift is a blessing to this kingdom and to me personally." Nia bowed deeply, her heart swelling with the weight of the moment. The journey from outcast to honored healer had been long and fraught with hardship, but in this moment she stood as a beacon of hope and change. The king continued, "Nia's story is not only one of healing but of forgiveness and transformation. She has shown us that kindness can overcome fear, and that even those cast aside can become pillars of strength." Nia stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the court and all who listened. "I have suffered because of fear and misunderstanding, but I choose to forgive those who turned away from me. My gift is not a curse but a call to heal. Let us remember that kindness can break the hardest walls and that healing begins with compassion." Her words resonated deeply, silencing the room as courtiers and nobles reflected on the truth they carried. Among the crowd, some who had once whispered doubts now nodded with newfound respect. In the days that followed, Nia's role within the kingdom grew. She was appointed as the royal healer, entrusted not only with the prince's care but with advising the court on matters of health and well-being. Her presence brought a fresh perspective, blending ancient wisdom with humility and grace. She traveled beyond the palace walls, visiting villages and towns, offering healing to those in need and spreading a message of understanding. The kingdom began to shift, its people learning to look beyond appearances and fears to see the heart within. Nia's forgiveness extended even to the villagers of Kilima who had once spat on her before prayers. When she returned home, she offered healing and hope rather than anger, teaching that true strength lies in mercy. Prince Tano remained a steadfast ally, his gratitude a constant source of encouragement. Together, they worked to bridge the divide between palace and village, fostering unity and trust. As seasons passed, the tale of Nia's healing and forgiveness became legend, a story told by firesides and in courts, reminding all that courage, kindness, and the willingness to overcome fear can change destinies. Nia stood not just as a healer of bodies, but as a healer of hearts and souls, her journey a testament to the power of grace in a world too often clouded by prejudice. The kingdom of Zawadi blossomed under this new light, its people inspired by a young woman who dared to heal beyond the boundaries of fear and hate. The sun had just begun its slow descent over the kingdom of Zawadi, painting the palace walls with warm hues of gold and amber. The once gloomy corridors now shimmered with a new energy, a sense of hope and renewal that had been absent for too long. At the heart of this change was Nia, the young woman who had come from a village marked by fear and rejection and had turned the tide for a kingdom on the brink of despair. The grand hall of the palace was filled with courtiers, nobles and advisors, all gathered to witness a moment that would be remembered in the annals of Zawadi's history. King Jabari sat on his throne, regal and composed, yet his eyes sparkled with pride and gratitude. Beside him stood Prince Tano, now restored to health but still delicate, his gaze bright and full of life. The doors opened slowly and Nia entered, her presence commanding yet humble. She wore simple robes woven from soft linen, adorned with a delicate necklace, a gift from the queen symbolizing trust and respect. As she approached the throne, a hush fell over the room. King Jabari rose, his voice carrying authority and warmth. "Today, we honor a healer whose courage and gift have saved my son's life and brought hope to our kingdom. Nia, from the village of Kilima, you have shown us the power of kindness and the strength found in unexpected places." Nia bowed her head deeply, feeling the weight of the moment and the journey that had brought her here. She glanced at Prince Tano, whose eyes shone with a gratitude words could not fully express. The king continued, "We welcome you as a respected member of our court, our healer and advisor. Your place is among us now, not as an outcast, but as a cherished part of our family and our future." Applause filled the hall, and some courtiers who had once doubted her, now offered respectful nods and smiles. It was a transformation not just of status but of hearts and minds. In the days that followed, Nia's role grew beyond healing the prince. She became a symbol of reconciliation, bridging the worlds of village and palace, tradition and change. Her wisdom and compassion were sought by many, from nobles with ailments to common folk with wounds both seen and unseen. Prince Tano, whose strength returned with each passing day, often sought her counsel. Their bond, forged in the crucible of illness and healing, blossomed into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. The prince admired Nia's resilience and grace, seeing in her the qualities of a true leader. One afternoon, in the quiet of the palace gardens, the prince spoke candidly. "Nia, you have not only healed my body but also taught me the meaning of courage and kindness. You have changed my world, and I hope to carry that change with me always." Nia smiled gently, touched by his words. "Your strength was always within you, Prince Tano. I only helped you find it again. It is a gift we all carry when we choose to see beyond fear and pain." News of Nia's acceptance and honor reached back to Kilima, where the villagers who had once spat on her now held her in reverence. Yet, true to her nature, Nia chose forgiveness over resentment. She understood the roots of their fear and sorrow and sought to heal those wounds as well. She returned to Kilima often, bringing medicine, teaching the villagers about healing and compassion, and encouraging the children to dream beyond the limitations of superstition. Her presence brought peace and slowly, the village transformed into a place of hope and understanding. During a festival held in her honor, Nia stood before the gathered crowd and spoke with the gentle authority that had won so many hearts. "Kindness is a healing force," she said. "It can mend what fear has broken and build bridges where walls once stood. We must remember that healing begins not just with the body but with the heart. To overcome fear, we must choose to see each other with compassion and courage." Her words resonated deeply, touching the souls of those who listened. The villagers, nobles, and even distant travelers carried her message far beyond the borders of Zawadi. In the palace, Nia's influence continued to grow. She helped establish a center for healing, where knowledge from the village and palace combined, fostering a new era of medicine and understanding. She trained apprentices, blending ancient traditions with new practices, ensuring that her gift would live on and expand. The prince, now strong and wise beyond his years, prepared to rule with the lessons he had learned from Nia. Lessons of empathy, courage, and the power of unexpected heroes. Together, they envisioned a kingdom where no one would be cast out for fear or superstition, where every person's light could shine. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the palace, Nia reflected on her journey. From the lonely girl spit on before prayers to the honored healer and advisor, she had traveled a path marked by pain, hope, and transformation. Her heart was full, not just with the gratitude of the prince and the king, but with the knowledge that her gift had changed lives and healed wounds far deeper than illness alone. She knew that the road ahead would have challenges, but she faced them with the same quiet strength that had carried her this far. For in every spit, every touch, every act of kindness, there was a power greater than fear, a power that could revive not only the dying prince but an entire kingdom.